Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the show. It's been a while since I've done one of these. And this is going to be a personal blog post because I'm kind of wanting to separate my political stuff from this particular podcast. So this is going to be more personal than anything else. We are roughly 5 months into the pandemic. Depending on what time you say the pandemic really hit America, the shutdown began in mid-March. We are now in mid-August. It's been 5 months. And there is no relief in sight. School started today in my local county. Some of my friends on Facebook are posting their first day teaching pictures and whatnot. There's virtual learning going on right now in the county. So yeah, it's been quite the summer for our kids. It's been quite a summer for all of us, frankly. And now the kids are back in school, at home for the most part. I think most of them are home right now. And yeah, it's definitely been challenging for everybody. Give you a little bit of backstory. When this first broke out, I was working on first shift at a place called West Rock in Forest City, North Carolina. That part of the company makes merchandising displays for retail stores. And up until the pandemic hit, we were really going well. And I'm talking about 6-7 days a week, sometimes with plenty of overtime and all of that. Well, in I guess late January, early February, when we really started hearing about how much of an impact this was going to have, orders started tapering off. Now that, if I could get a little bit political, if retail industries see that demand's going to go down because of this, surely the people in power could have seen this and responded a lot sooner than they did. But I digress. I had a really nice job there. 40 hours a week, consistent time, plenty of overtime when things were really busy, and sometimes it really got busy to the point where you were begging for a day off. Well, that dried up, and at the end of April, 6 weeks into the pandemic, I lost my job from a permanent layoff because, according to West Rock's corporate office, merchandising displays, demand for merchandising displays was going to be significantly decreased for the near future. At the plant I was working at, they had 300 people at that plant. 100 of them got laid off permanently. So yeah, that's not fun. And there's no guarantee that there won't be future layoffs. Obviously, I was devastated, even with the $600 extra a week. And I was pulling in the most I'd ever made in my life during that unemployment period, but at the same time, I wasn't happy about it because I liked working there at that job. I was building a future there. I was making good money. And I was expecting to be there until I retired. And now I'm not. And I would like to go back, but I'd have to rebuild everything. I would have no seniority, no nothing. So, yeah, I'm not very happy about that. So for about 6 weeks after that, I was out of work. 6-7 weeks, something like that. And for the most part, it was okay. I caught up on some shows I had been wanting to watch for a while. I did a little bit of shopping. I rearranged my room. I made it to room/office, which I'm doing this podcast out of. And I am feeling pretty well. I have a new job now. That job involves temperature screenings at a facility here in Forest City. You probably have heard of this place. It's called Facebook. I work for a third-party company that does the medical screenings. Basically, all we're doing is taking their temperature. Money's really good, surprisingly. I'm shocked at how much they're paying us, but it's only a temporary job. And we're going to be there for about a year. Maybe longer, maybe shorter, who knows. So I have a dichotomy. I want this to be gone, but yet I have a job that pays really well. I'm getting pretty decent hours. I wish I could get more, but isn't that everybody? The sad part about it is that I'm one of the fortunate ones. There are a lot of people who are still unemployed. There are a lot of people who are afraid of going back to work. And they're being mocked and ridiculed, even though many of them have legitimate reasons to be worried. I really think it's a sad statement of fact that we question why people would be scared during one of the worst pandemics we've seen in a century. A lot of it comes from the fact that there is a natural tendency to want to disbelieve something of this magnitude is happening. I can reflect back to 9/11. I slept through it. I was working a third shift job at the time. I came home. I remember I got home about 6:30. I went to my room. I actually had videotaped Raw, Monday Night Raw the night before. I actually watched it. And about 8:30, I went to bed. And back then I had dial-up internet. Remember that? And I was downloading some stuff. So I left the computer on to download this stuff and went to bed. I can't remember exactly what it was. It's been so long. I know it was a big file. It was going to take some time because it was dial-up internet back then. It took quite a while to download something you can literally download in seconds nowadays. But I went to bed 8:30. I got up at 3 o'clock, around that time. My mom was at my sister's. My sister was pregnant with my niece at the time. My aunt didn't want to disturb me with this. She was in her room watching this stuff. And I had a fan on. You know, like you're probably hearing right now. Mostly to keep me cool because it was still warm at that time. But also to help me go to sleep. Well, as we're all well aware now, 9/11 happened. I woke up at 3:30 that afternoon, 3:30, and I turned on the television. I remember it was not on any of the news stations or any place that would normally have news programming. And I'm watching it, and the World Trade Center is on fire. Now, I'm confused when I wake up, when I see this. So I'm thinking in my sleep-addled mind that there's a fire going on. And then I see there's a terrorist attack, and I'm thinking the buildings haven't collapsed yet. And then I turn away and look on my computer. I had a desktop at the time. And I'm going through my email, and all of a sudden it changes after 9 o'clock, all about 9/11. There wasn't real social media at the time. I didn't even have LiveJournal back then. I think I had a Blogger account, maybe. I can't remember if it was at that time I had the Blogger account. I knew I was on Fark.com. That's a news aggregation site that has a bit of social aspect to it, and it changed dramatically when that happened. And I'm sitting there, and they're saying the buildings had collapsed and all this, and I think for a solid half hour to an hour, I'm just sitting there gobsmacked. I don't think I even said anything. And yeah, that was something that I was disbelieving for a while. And I remember going to work that night and everybody just being completely angry. Now, 9/11 is a very complicated issue that people want to simplify. A lot of people that night wanted to blame all Muslims for the attack, when we all know that it was a radical segment, a small radical segment, that carried out this attack. It would be like blaming the Ku Klux Klan. It would be like blaming the entirety of Christianity for the Ku Klux Klan's attack on a synagogue. That is basically what you're saying when you say all Islam is bad and they're responsible for the attacks on 9/11. Well, should we blame all Christians for a Klansman attack on a synagogue? Which I don't know if it ever actually happened, but I would not be surprised if it did, because we've had synagogues attacked here by racists. I don't know specifically if the Klan was involved, but that would basically be along the similar lines. So, when you hear people trying to simplify this pandemic by saying that, well, masks don't work. Masks do work to help better protect other people in case you've got this virus. It gives you some protection, not completely. That is why social distancing is important. That's why wearing masks are important. That's why staying at home as much as you can and washing your hands and all of this is so important. There is no one particular thing that will provide you perfect protection from this. But yet people want to hear, well, masks don't give you complete protection. Well, of course, if that's the case, masks don't protect you anyway. Why should I wear a mask? Bulletproof vests aren't a 100% guarantee that you won't get shot. Depending on the caliber, it may not stop the impact. B, it may keep the bullet from getting into your flesh, but you will still feel the physical impact of the blow, and that could cause injuries and possibly even death. depending on where it strikes. If it strikes around the heart area, the blow could be so impactful that the bullet wouldn't even need to get through the vest to kill you. So there's no 100% guarantee that wearing a bulletproof vest is going to keep you from getting shot. So should we tell all police officers and other security people that are required to wear bulletproof vests to not wear them? You are driving in your car. You're wearing your seatbelt. There is no 100% guarantee that if you get into a wreck or somebody runs into you or something happens to where your car is going 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you have to stop. Either you have to slam on the brakes or something causes your car to stop suddenly. There is no guarantee that even with that seatbelt that you're going to come out of that completely alive. Even with the airbags, there's no 100% guarantee. Should we stop wearing seatbelts? Should we not have airbags because it's not 100% protecting? No, we should. There's a reason for it. Your chances of survival are better by wearing your seatbelt and having airbags in your car than they are without them. Okay? Because you got a baby seat in your car does not mean that your baby is 100% guaranteed from protection against a possible accident. You could have it perfectly put in there. You could have your baby perfectly strapped down in that baby seat and the seat strapped down into the seat below. Done everything by the textbook. And you have a wreck and that baby's still killed. Why? Because there's not 100% guaranteed protection. Should you stop putting your baby in a baby seat? Of course not. The reason we have that is it gives your baby a much better chance of survival than without it. So when the experts say wear your mask, it means that your chances of survival, should you come into contact with this virus, are better than without it. Is it as good as it could be? Probably not, because we got caught unawares for the most part. Here's the thing, and you'll have to forgive me. My throat's dry. I'm going to chew some gum to get the saliva glands going to coat my throat so I'm not coughing. Here's the thing. We're not dealing with the physical parts of this virus as well as we should. Just as importantly, we're not dealing with the mental aspects of this virus as well as we should. The truth is, in this country, for some reason, we seem to think that when times of crisis happen like this, we're also supposed to be stoic. We're all supposed to be not letting it to affect us, or not to acknowledge that it's affecting us. I guess we're supposed to John Wayne the whole thing. Well, folks, I'm not John Wayne, nor do I pretend to be. The biggest problem we have right now is that people have a really big case of cabin fever. They're staying at home far more than they were, especially in the first few weeks of the pandemic. That's why you saw so many people wanting to break the rules, demanding everything reopen, thinking that, grasping onto some hope they can get back to normality. And this is the problem. We didn't grasp the seriousness and the severity of this. Our leadership, not just in political leadership, but in the media, in our churches, in our communities, not just talking federal and state, but in our communities, community leaders, business leaders, did not understand the severity of what we are confronting. There was the hope in the early days of this pandemic that it would be blow over in a few weeks. That by summertime, things would be back to normal. We could have ball games again. We could have summer vacations again. And we wouldn't really have to worry about this. People like Dr. Fauci and others were saying this is probably going to go into next year, and probably we'd have to deal with this for 12 to 18 months, meaning well into 2021. We were told this. Now, do I think Dr. Fauci has done a perfect job in this? Of course not. He's made mistakes like any man has made mistakes. But in times like these, when our entire way of life has been shaken to the core, when we don't want to accept that things are dramatically different, that life has changed fundamentally, we tend to want to force normality back in any way we can. And this is an election year, and politicians thrive on that. In any other year, say if this had happened a year ago, when it was not an election year, I think you would have had much more stringent policies in the Republican states. They're not facing election. Trump can bray all he wants to. Governor McMaster has just been elected governor, and he's going to do what's right for his people. And the election's over a year and a half away. But this happened during an election year. One of the most critical election years we've had in decades. A very unpopular president who, let's face it, has many people believing he is committing criminal acts in office, is up for re-election. He had just gone through impeachment. Some believe that he should have been convicted. Some believe he was persecuted. This nation has not been this divided since Vietnam and Watergate. And we're throwing the greatest pandemic we've seen since 1918, right after the end of the First World War. What is shocking is that we don't understand the severity of what we're seeing right now. We don't understand not just the physical toll it's taken, but the mental toll, the economic toll. People are worried about taxes. People are worried about government spending. When in reality, we may have been just scratching the surface of all of this. As this goes on, I'm constantly reminded of why we are not as great a nation as we think we are. In times of old, I think we would have come together and beat this thing a lot sooner than we have. But with current political leadership as the way it is right now, the current political climate, the current social climate, the fact that before this pandemic we were incredibly divided to begin with, this was, it just amazes me how badly this has been handled. Not just on a political level, but in society in general. You've got people who are thriving on conspiracy theories because they want to believe this was cooked up in some lab in Wuhan. The realist, those of us who look at the facts and look at what's realistic, understand that had this been cooked in a lab in Wuhan and been designed, it probably would have been a hell of a lot more effective and a lot quicker spread. This was a disease among animals, primarily bats, and some idiot in Wuhan decided, I'm very hungry for bats tonight. So I'm going to go to my favorite restaurant or whatever, market, and eat bats. Why? I don't know. There are parts of China that have not advanced modernly into what is fit for human consumption and what is not fit for human consumption. I don't understand it. It's a cultural thing to a certain degree. I do know that there are people in China who are trying to end this tradition. Some traditions should die. And that's the problem. We don't understand that in modern society today, we have to be more interactive. We have to communicate better with each other. We have to understand that what we do in our daily lives has an impact on not just us. We'd like to think that we don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but we do. There are people who don't want to believe that. They think of globalization as one world government and such, and they don't realize it's been going on for decades. It has nothing to do with government. It has to do with the fact that it's cheaper to get stuff from China. And that's not going to change. There's a lot of stress on us all with all these issues coming at us. And now, of course, we have the biggest civil rights issues coming up since, I would say, the 70s. The George Floyd incident has exposed the fact that we still have a very serious issue with racism in this country. There are people who are in denial of this. There are people who we thought were not racist who turned out to be racist. We have people who want to avenge past crimes against their ethnic group, by the majority ethnic group, which of course is Caucasians, mostly white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And of course those very same people go, why should I be punished for what my ancestors did? And all this has been in a pressure cooker known as COVID-19. It is one of those things that I'm not a psychology student, I'm not a sociology student. I have had both classes. I have a very fundamental knowledge of those two fields. And I can guarantee you that from a sociological and psychological perspective, this is like a Chernobyl before the meltdown. Okay? On one side, you've got conservatives who want to think this country is perfectly fine the way it is, and that if you just simply listen to what they say and keep out all the undesirables, namely Mexicans, namely Hispanics from Central America who are trying to flee from incredible violence that, you know, makes what we have up here look relatively tame by comparison. You've got people who want to find scapegoats for their problems. That's why people who don't want to tackle the racial issues basically attack George Floyd's past. Look, I know he's no angel. I know he's not going to be nominated for sainthood. I don't care how bad a guy he was. If you're apprehending him for what they apprehended him for, and he dies, and he's not shooting at you, I can understand if you're somebody pointing something that looks like a gun at a cop, and they tell you to drop the weapon and you don't drop the weapon, I understand that. I'm okay with it. If the circumstances are that the cop, and this is why I believe in body cameras and full audio and video, I would dare say find a way to stream it live if you can to the station, to where they can see it, what's going on at a particular point. But this guy allegedly passed a counterfeit 20. Okay? Now, if I had passed a counterfeit 20 by accident, let's just assume that for the sake of argument, George Floyd did this by accident. I at one time was a cashier at a Walmart. I never had seen a counterfeit bill, but we've been warned from time to time to watch out for them. And I did everything I was told to, mark them with a pen, look them over like you're supposed to, and all that and such. But with printing technology the way it is now, it's very easy to be fooled. You're a cashier, you're under a lot of pressure to get the customers in and out. You don't want to hold people up. It's easy to make a mistake. Let's say, for sake of argument, George Floyd broke 100. I don't know if he did or not, but let's say at another story broke 100. And before that, a cashier had gotten a counterfeit 20 and gave him one of those counterfeit 20s. Now, I don't know. Maybe George Floyd made some 20s that were counterfeit. I don't know. Still doesn't mean he should have died for what happened. Okay? To me, It's the sense that there are police officers who are not accountable to the people that they serve is the reason we have the Black Lives Matter movement. It's the fact that there are officers, not even a majority, not even a significant minority, who decide to take it upon themselves to go above and beyond the rules and regulations to live out their racist fantasies. Okay? We all know there are bad cops. It's in every field. You've got people who are teachers that are bad teachers. You've got bad cashiers. You've got bad machinists. You've got bad people everywhere in society. Doesn't mean the whole field is bad. But the problem is that in the police field, there is this tendency to protect the thin blue line, to cover your fellow cop's back. I can understand that to a degree, but at the same time, if you're a police officer, you are supposed to protect and serve. You are supposed to uphold the regulations, the Constitution. That includes the rights of the accused. Okay? There's a reason we have that. So that we just don't railroad anybody for a crime that they didn't commit. Or we don't try to add on crimes for a person that committed a relatively small offense. Not all cops are bad. We know this. But there's enough of them out there to where the stench is there. That there is reason to believe that there needs to be police reforms. More accountability to the citizens that the police officers serve. There are racial problems with police officers not doing what they should be doing. Instead, they are, in some cases, some of them are being racist. And I hear people talk about Blue Lives Matter. They don't understand the connotation of that. There is this reflex in some people to want to put belief that every cop is fine. That every cop does his or her duty to the utmost of their ability. The truth is, most do. Some don't. There are crooked cops. There are bad cops. There are racist cops. There are sexist cops. There are cops who take advantage of the people that they are arresting. Are they majority? No. Are they even a significant minority? No. But there's enough of them out there that it is a problem. And when situations like this crop up, when there is an issue of trust, it has to be addressed. And unfortunately, police unions, instead of addressing the problem by saying, look, we're going to get rid of these bad officers, we'll make sure their rights are upheld, but we want to make sure they have a fair hearing. And if they are as bad as you say they are, we want to boot them. That's not the case. There are some police unions leaders who believe that the people they are called in on, like African American people or Hispanics, are just animals. Some have actually openly said that. Doesn't mean all officers are bad. Doesn't mean the majority of officers are bad. Doesn't even mean that a significant minority are bad. It's just that there's an element that taints it for the rest of us. And it makes the job harder for those officers who do good. And there are people in the Blue Lives Matter movement who probably are trying to make sure those good cops understand that they have their back. The problem is you're not seeing the issue for what it is that there are some cops who will not stand up to those bad cops because the system is you've got to protect your fellow cop, even if they're bad. There is that system in some places. And let me stress once again, not every place is exactly the same. This area where I live at isn't like the next county over or the next state over. One sheriff's department is going to be different from another. You may have one sheriff who will not police the mask mandate because they think it's against God's word. The next county over, you'll have some sheriff who goes, you know what? We'll do it, but we'll do it as within the law. We'll try to balance things out as best we can. But we're not going to throw you in jail for it. We may not write you a ticket for it, but we're going to try our best to say, hey, wear a mask. To me, we were already a powder keg to begin with before this pandemic came along. The current administration exposed it. Not directly so much as indirectly. The truth is these issues were there to begin with. And in a political and cultural environment where it's not about the facts anymore, it's what you think, what you feel, what you want to believe. Let me get to a moment about fake news, that saying, and the so-called liberal bias in the media. Okay? I've talked about this before. It's a myth. We all have biases. That's no question. If I write a story about a particular issue that I'm covering as a journalist, I'm going to have my opinions. I'm going to try and not make it influence the story I tell. But let's say, let me go back a few years to the local high school down the road that had just been opened up. And a couple years in, they started finding cracks in the brickwork. It had been built too quickly. They had rushed the job. And some people in the school board didn't want that to get out because it would be embarrassing. And they would attack people that mentioned it. I'm kind of fuzzy on the details because it's almost 30 years ago, and it wasn't in the school district that I'm in now. In fact, I was living in another town that was where my high school was when I graduated from high school many years ago. So I don't keep up with the rival high schools, all that, but I did hear about this, and I don't know every little detail about it, but I do know it was a big controversy. There are people who want to believe this country is great when in fact it's not as great as we think it is. To the point where they will look at a story that dares to criticize this country, even when it's deserved criticism, and they'll go, it's not true. There are people, plenty of people, who want to believe that white is right, when in fact that if you look at our history and from a objective perspective, you could make the argument that Caucasians have not done that well in this country for the majority of people. That white wasn't right. But people don't want to listen to that. They want to listen to their own biases. I remember back to when this really started getting into shape back in the early 80s, when you had CNN come along, you had the 24-hour news cycle, and you had politicians who, on the right, who basically blasted any bad story about them. It happens. Right now, we're in the system that's been brewing for decades, and it was going on long before that. Politicians on the left and to a certain degree on the right, politicians on the right and to a certain degree on the left, have always attacked the media because they want you to believe that their rhetoric, their policies are all perfect, and they're not. Journalists are supposed to hold politicians and government accountable to the people. When you attack journalists, you're attacking their ability to hold you accountable. And when you buy into this fake news, liberal bias bullcrap, you are deceiving yourself into thinking that the very people you put your faith in, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's Hillary Clinton, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Reagan, all of them are perfect. They're not. The MAGA movement, as it's called, doesn't understand that they are fighting against their very own interest. They're fighting against the best interest of this country. They're convinced that Donald Trump is going to supposedly make America great again. But yet, weren't we great already to begin with? We weren't perfect. But for a long period of time, and most of that time, Republicans were in charge. Our educational system went down. Our healthcare system went down. Our economic and living standards went down. It's easy to want to blame one particular party, but the truth of the matter is, you look, since 1994, Republicans have been in charge of Congress all but 4 years. So the last over a quarter of a century, Congress has been in control of Republicans all but 4 years. From 2006 or 2007 to 2011. All but 4 years. In that time, the White House has had, mostly Democratic presidents. 6 years of Clinton, 8 years of Obama, but 4 years of Trump, 12 years of George W. Bush. But before that, you had 12 years of... So it's not entirely Republicans' fault. There are some Democrats who deserve the blame too. It's the fact that compromise has become a problem. We don't compromise, even outside of politics. You're not going to get always what you want. But now you've got in society where you've got to have, if you go to a store and it's not, the product is not perfect, and you go and let's say you've got a TV There's a 90-day return policy. 100 days in, you don't like the TV anymore. You don't have the box. You don't have your receipt. You know they still carry it. You're going to take your TV down there and they're not going to take it back. And you're going to whine and complain about it. The sad thing is, a lot of customers are going to get away with that. Even though you knew the policy was 90 days. Even though you knew that you had to have your receipt. You had to have the original box. And everything in the original box. But because we have been taught that not to compromise, that to get your way, not just by politicians, but by a lot of people in general. It's a sad statement of affairs. What is really scary about these times is the unknown. I have a friend right now who is going through this, and she just posted a comment to a story I posted on Facebook about COVID-19, and she says, in a sense, that the most troublesome thing is what they're not even mentioning in the media. And I won't get into her situation, but there's a lot more symptoms that you would not necessarily believe. In my mind, COVID-19 the problem isn't just the virus itself, it's what it exacerbates. You could make an argument there are some people who die from things other than the virus, and they're listed as COVID-19. Not all of them are like that. But there are probably some cases where that has happened. Well, guess what? If COVID-19 exacerbated an already existing condition to the point where that person died from that condition, yeah, COVID-19 is partially responsible for that death. And so it should be listed. We're still learning about this. This is the problem that people don't understand. They want to believe this is just the flu, a really bad case of the flu. It's not. It's a whole new ballgame. It's the unknown about this that scares people. It scares me. I'm scared to death of getting this thing. Because I'm not in the best of shape. I'm not, I've had issues with bronchitis in the past. I've had pneumonia in the past. So I'm scared. I got a history of diabetes in my family. I don't have it myself. What scares me is, and this is something that I'm not sure that you'll probably agree with, but I tend to look at both best and worst case scenarios. What scares me the most is this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm talking the very tip of the iceberg. That as this goes on, the virus mutates and we're still trying to find a way to deal with it, that it's going to blow up big time. No matter what we do, people are going to get infected. It's going to kill a whole lot more people. It's going to make what we've seen right now look like child's play. I see people talk about, well, it has 1% fatality rate. We have 320 million Americans in this country. A 1% fatality rate is 3.2 million people dying. 3.5 million people dying. That's a major city right there, folks. Not as big as New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or Houston, but it's big. That would make an impact on America in ways you can't even imagine. You'd be losing doctors. You'd be losing lawyers. You'd be losing teachers. You'd be losing scientists. You'd be losing academics. You could be losing people who do important things in this country. You could be losing auto mechanics. You could be losing plumbers. You could be losing electricians. 3.2 million people. If you believe the 1%. To me, the people we've already lost is unacceptable. This is on top of people who die every year of a wide variety of things. My hope is that through battling this thing, we can learn how to deal with the things that kill people every year, like the flu, like heart disease and stroke and other things. We can help to let people live longer. How many people have died that should have lived longer? Okay? And you can make the case people should live better, live healthier, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I want to beat this thing. I want to learn as much about it so we can beat this thing, so we can get rid of it. To where the next time it crops up, it will be like the flu. And we'll have always had a few people die of it every year. But we'll get closer, like the flu, every year to learning more and more about it, to controlling it. Like we learned how to control the Spanish flu. The unknown scares us. That's the reason why you're seeing what you're seeing right now. The panic, the anxiety, the depression, all of that right now is going on. And you have every reason to be scared. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be afraid. As long as you don't let it control you. As long as you find out the facts and be able to protect yourself to the best of your ability and to protect others to the best of your ability. That's why they ask you to wear masks. That's why they ask you to social distance. That's why that you can't go out to do the things you want to do, because right now we are in a crisis situation. Okay? I hear all this talk about individual rights. What about the rights of the other people? Is it not arguable that your individual rights end when it impacts the individual rights of other people to enjoy their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness? So do yourself a favor and do your fellow citizens a favor. Stop with the anti-mask BS. We had this argument a century ago with Spanish influenza. Masks are not perfect, but they're better than nothing. You've got a better chance of surviving than without it. So wear your mask. Do what's asked of you right now. In this crisis situation. In this emergency. Global emergency. Not just local, not just state, not just national, global. Listen to the people who know what they're talking about. And they are going to be the first to admit they're still learning about this themselves. Things will change about this. We are learning more and more about this every single day. What may have been understood today may be different tomorrow. That is life, people. There may come a day where they say, you know what, masks don't work. And we'll deal with it then. Fine. There is a statement saying masks aren't there was a statement that said that checking fevers wasn't a perfect way to figure out who has it and who doesn't. That directly impacts the job I have right now. If they decide that checking fevers isn't enough, they're going to probably have to have us do more training. We may have to get to the point where we may have to do actual testing on people before they can come onto the facility. That is a possibility. Or they may decide, instead of having us do it, get trained medical people to do it, and I'm out of a job again. Or they may have me go through the training, which I wouldn't mind. It keeps my job. There's a lot of uncertainty, folks. People don't like living in uncertainty. And for a long time, just like before 9/11, we believed we were invulnerable. We believed we were untouchable. That pandemics were only going to be in Asia or Africa, maybe South America. Couldn't happen here. Just like before 9/11. Remember that? Some of you are old enough to remember life before 9/11. Terrorist attacks were the only overseas. They never really happened here. Or if it does, it's usually some lone nut that might kill a few people. And that's it. There are always the signs there. The 93 attack on the World Trade Center. The 95 attack by Timothy McVeigh, a domestic terrorist, on the federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Life has to change sometimes. Yet some people don't want to change their lives. That's why you get some resistance when we have a school shooting. When there is a call for rational gun control to make sure that the guns don't get into the people that could be dangerous enough to attack schools, it gets overblown to make people thinking that the government wants to get all the guns. When you examine who's making the arguments the strongest, who's financing those arguments, you find out that it has nothing to do with actual gun control. It's having to do with gun sales. Life is complex. People want it to be simple. Issues like this are complex, and they want it to be simple. Complexity and the unknown are two things people don't like. But you have to learn to deal with them. If you don't learn how to deal with them, you are in for a very serious awakening. Life is difficult, even in the best of times. Right now is not the best of times. We're dealing with the biggest public health emergency in a century. We are dealing with the biggest national crisis and emergency we have dealt with in 80 plus years. Not since World War II have we had a situation where the very future of the country is on the brink. We've had the greatest social unrest in 50 years. This is not something we're used to. For a long, long time before 9/11, we lived a comfortable life, thinking that we were invulnerable. And then after 9/11, we thought we were invulnerable again. Now we're not. And that scares a lot of people, deeply. When you're scared, you do stupid things. You do things that you would normally not do. The unknown is what scares people the most. That is why we're having the issues we're having. I want to thank you for tuning into this. I hope if you've gotten this far, You are a braver soul than I am. You're a more patient soul than I am. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully we'll talk again soon. For now, good day, good luck, and may the good news be yours.